Welcome to Illo Talk. I am Corey Kerr, and this is the first part of a series that I'm going to do called Intentional Creativity. As a side note, if you don't want to listen to me blather on and you just want to jump to the stuff, I've got chapter headings, and so check the description of this video, and you can kind of jump time codes there. This is based on something that I've been doing with students for a while now. Inspiration, the muse, the genius, or whatever you want to call it, is a fragile series of connections that develops in a very specific set of circumstances. And if there's too much noise, distraction, stress, or entertaining numbing, then your mind has no reason or opportunity to engage in a creative modality. If you want to learn more about creative modalities of thinking, research the default mode network. That's what neurologists call the state of mind that we get into when you go into a state of restful wakefulness. Some people describe this as daydreaming, things like that. But this is a flow state that your brain defaults to when it is allowed to have boredom without numbing behaviors, kind of to get in the way of kind of engaging and switching into that thing. Now, a note in all of these different things, of which there are 5 stages, by the way, each one of these, you need to make sure that you are silencing the inner critic. And so all of us have a voice or thoughts in our mind where we are anticipating what other people might think or feel or say about the things that we're doing or what we are or what we look like or those types of things, or the quality of the things that we're producing. This is where you start to think that you might feel silly or foolish or whatever. Try to banish any negative or positive thoughts that are going to judge these types of behaviors while you're doing these types of behaviors, because that will dampen or kill your ability to do the activities, as well as the kind of effects that you can get from them. What it is scientifically proven activities that I have that I've tested with about 35 students for the last 7 weeks. I also filmed their descriptions of their experience with the intent to use those testimonies in these videos, but it was actually such a personal, vulnerable, and moving experience just filming that I didn't really want to cheapen it by putting it on YouTube. So I will mention their feedback anonymously when relevant. For example, my students reported that they slept better, they reduced their anxiety, depression, negative self-talk, and they increased their productivity, ability to focus, and creative thinking. Those are backed by scientific studies. When you want to research that type of thing, look at the effects of boredom on creativity. There's some really interesting studies which I can go into at another time, but I'm not going to now. I also want to point out that these activities are not a replacement for a belief system. So atheists, agnostics, and believers alike are welcome to supplement, but not supplant their beliefs with these activities. So the first stage of this intentional creativity is to create space. Okay. In our lives, we have programmed and unprogrammed time. Programmed time is when other people or things are deciding how you think and feel about stuff. That programmed time is going to be electronics or numbing behaviors, like distractions, and those types of things that you might seek out so that you don't have to be with yourself. I had one student say that they didn't enjoy the thoughts that they had about themselves, and so they had not realized that they had been numbing so that they didn't have to think through things. They had been avoiding kind of sitting alone with their own thoughts because they didn't like them, and it was unpleasant. And so through some of these activities, they were able to identify some things that they needed to work through, and it was a very positive type thing. But the idea is that you want some small amount of unprogrammed time every day. That means time that is not using a numbing behavior, entertainment, distraction, or those types of things. And when you do that, you will switch over into the default mode network. And there's been a ton of studies that I've talked about in other videos that I don't have to regurgitate here, but a ton of studies that prove that doing this will increase your empathy of other people. It will increase your moral core. It'll increase your long-term memory, and it increases your creativity for just 30 minutes a day. If you want to shortcut to some of these things, then you can look up mindfulness and those types of things. And so here's a few things that I recommend to create this space, and then I'm gonna go over some exercises of what you can do to fill this space, which will still be considered unprogrammed time, and not be something that replaces the kind of numbing behaviors that we're all used to. So first is delete distractions. Get rid of any apps, activities, or habits that you don't find valuable, but that take up some of your time. I had one student say that they were spending upwards of 3 hours a day on TikTok, and that they realized once they reduced or eliminated that they were a lot more pleased with what was going on and how they felt about things. And they actually realized that they didn't really like the way that they felt while they were on there, as they compared themselves to other people in kind of a negative way. And there's been studies done internally at Meta that Instagram actually increases anxiety and depression, especially amongst adolescent girls and girls in their early 20s. And so there's a lot of this type of thing, but you want to get rid of any apps, get rid of any activities, get rid of any habits, at least for small periods of time, that kind of get in the way of letting your mind wander. There's a great quote, which I quoted before, that talk about these fragile threads that kind of string together, and every beep and buzz and vibration and ding and bell of our notifications interrupts that and kind of destroys those fragile connections. Another thing, choose to put your phone down and disconnect at certain times each day. I had several students do this. One student said that she didn't do anything on her phone that wasn't totally necessary until 4 p.m. And so if she could, she turned off her notifications. She got rid of her any apps on her phone, little games and things like that, and turned everything off that wasn't absolutely essential until 4 p.m. Android and iOS both have the ability to do kind of a do not disturb situation, and you can also go in and customize your notification. This one seems overly simple, but it's a really important one. Wear a watch. And by that I mean wear an analog watch, right? Or what we called a digital watch in the 80s. It can be quartz or whatever, but wear a dumb watch, one that is not connected to anything. It's not a smart watch. It's not connected to your smartphone or anything like that. Because a significant number of your phone pickups, which you can measure by going to the settings and look at your screen time, you can see the number of pickups that you've got, are actually just us checking what time it is. And then what happens is that we get sucked in and we go down a rabbit hole, right? And so if you wear a watch and you check the time on your watch rather than checking the time on your phone, you will actually find that you will have a significantly lower number of pickups, which will reduce the amount of distracting times that you have. It's not entertaining or numbing to know what time it is necessarily. And so if you just need to know what time it is, I would wear a watch. I like the Weekender. It's you can get it for about $35, really comfortable. The next one, this also seems like one that a lot of people fight against, but is very valuable. And I've got a number of students that have had really interesting experiences with this. Buy an alarm clock. Don't fall asleep or wake up with your phone in your face. This will absolutely change you. If you have trouble sleeping or you don't feel like you're getting a deep sleep, having that light in front of your face and having your mind numbed and entertained immediately before and immediately after you sleep is really bad, right? But if you can fall asleep with your own thoughts or fall asleep doing one of these activities that we're talking about, and I've got one specifically that really helps, that can increase the quality of your sleep. And I had at least 3 students very specifically that said that they had a lot of trouble sleeping before doing these types of things, and now they're sleeping like the dead. They fall asleep. One of them said, for the first time in years, I woke up in the same position as I fell asleep, because I've spent time just tossing and turning and then waking up and checking my phone and then tossing and turning and waking up and playing a game on my phone or doing whatever. And so he put his phone in his studio, and then he went to sleep with a book or with one of these breathing activities that we'll go over. And then he would wake up and he would have conversations with his wife, and they read scriptures in the morning during breakfast and things. And he had a time specifically that he would go get his phone out of his room, but he would wake up to an alarm clock. 2 or 3 others also had very similar experiences with this. I've kind of already mentioned this, but turn off all non-essential notifications. And so if there is something that is not absolutely essential, like I had one student who was a diabetic who used her phone to monitor her insulin and glucose and those types of things. Obviously, don't turn that off. That's important. But she admitted that she had used that as an excuse to be able to have her phone on her all the time. And so when she didn't need that information, she was able to step away from her phone or turn those things off. So anything that's not essential, like if you're going to lose your job if you don't pick up the phone, right? Don't mute your phone or whatever. But do you need to know every email, every text message, everything that comes through? Probably not. And during certain times, definitely not. And so really reevaluate your non-essential notifications and turn those off. I had a student say that she went in and turned off all non-essential notifications. And then she realized that she had become kind of frustrated getting all the dings and buzzes of the things that she thought were essential. And so she went through that list again and kind of called some of that list as well. And so she really narrowed it down after a series of kind of going through everything that had notifications turned on to that. The nice thing about this is that you choose to engage with your electronics rather than your electronics grabbing you and distracting you and pulling you into what they want you to know, right? You get to be intentional about your choice and your use of those electronics rather than being owned by them and controlled by them, right? Don't be the dog in Pavlov's experiment. Turn off all non-essential notifications. And I would recommend at certain times in the day, especially if you can't do anything about it, turn your phone to airplane mode, right? If I'm in the middle of a meeting and I can't answer my phone, then what benefit is it to me to know that my phone is ringing, right? Human beings survived for hundreds and thousands of years without knowing everything at the moment that it happens, and it's fine, right? It's fine. So if you do that, then you get to engage with your electronics when you choose to, and when you're in a space that you can do something about it. And the next thing is add boring activities to your day. Commute, go on walks, do observational drawing, do breathing exercises, do meditation, do all of these things without screens, without electronics, and if possible, without music or podcasts or audiobooks. Now, I'm not saying don't listen to music. I'm not saying, break your phone in half and throw it out the window and go live in a cave. What I'm saying is during certain activities, during times when you are intentionally trying to have this mental downtime, don't have anything else beyond that. Make it be as boring as possible, which will engage that default mode network and allow you to kind of engage into these things. And so there's that. We'll talk more about those breathing exercises and meditation later on in this video, and we'll talk about some of those active activities that you can do in subsequent videos. One more is be in nature without electronics. If you want extra added bonus in this, be barefoot. This does not have to be anything where you're doing anything crazy or whatever, but just observe things in nature. Pay attention to things that you might have been fascinated by as a child. A lot of this is actually getting into a childlike state. And that's not to say childish, but childlike, in that children are so much better than adults at learning. And it's because they have a sense of wonder, and they have the ability in a very, very neuroplastic mind to where it's adaptable, it changes, it's curious. Those types of things are very valuable. And what I would recommend is I would be in nature and I would watch nature. I would observe nature, look for patterns in nature, try to figure out what the difference between different tree bark patterns are, or different sensations or things that you're experiencing. But be in nature without electronics. Don't feel like, fight the need to be performative in that experience. Don't feel like you need to, picture it didn't happen type situation. Like, don't feel like you need to catalog it. Don't feel like you need to prove that it happened. You're in this experience for being present in your experience, not to prove to your friends that you're some sort of granola or something, right? And then finally, breathing, visualization, and movement, which we'll spend the majority of this video on. So those are some things to reduce or delete distractions and numbing behaviors. And as you do that, it will carve out time. It'll be very uncomfortable at first because I don't want to use the word addicted, but I do think it's an appropriate term for some people. But we have definitely been normalized and been accustomed and acclimated to being constantly barraged by noise, which is going to destroy your ability to be creative. So here are some activities. I'm going to describe these. I'm trying to figure out a way to where I feel comfortable doing this. It seems a little strange to me to like tell everybody to get off of their electronics and then to say, and now I'm going to walk you through a meditation exercise. Watch me on YouTube, like and subscribe, right? So actually, I'm just going to describe what these are. I'm not going to actually do any demos of them. If you guys fight me hard enough, maybe I'll do some demos later, but not in this video. So I'm just going to describe like what is going on with this, okay? So the first one, 2 basic ways of breathing. I had a student say, I thought breathing was really stupid and I didn't want to do it. But after hearing her classmates several weeks talk about the experiences that they were having with these intentional breathing exercises, she thought she'd try it. And she said it was transformative, that it really changed the game for her and that she'll be doing it now as an intentional practice for the rest of her life. And so if these sound kind of strange, they kind of are a little bit strange because breathing is an autonomic thing, but trust me on this. Anyway, so here's some things, right? Squared breathing. This is the number one thing that my students mentioned that helped alleviate anxiety and reduce stress. Squared breathing is simply breathing in for 4 seconds, holding for 4 seconds, breathing out for 4 seconds, holding for 4 seconds. One student described that his heartbeat would increase as he became really anxious about counting correctly and stuff. And so remember, no inner critic, don't judge yourself. If you can go more than 4, some people feel like, sorry, as you do this, you might cough and stuff because your lungs might not be used to this level of deep oxygenation. And so you can get a little bit of coughing. But if you can go to 5 or whatever, do that. That's fine, right? You're not going to die. I do recommend doing these 2 basic breathing activities. Sitting, though squared breathing you can do anywhere. And squared breathing is something that it doesn't look like you're necessarily doing anything. And so it's fine if you're feeling anxious, before a class or waiting in line or wherever. You can do this in public and it's totally cool. Be aware that you don't lock your knees so that you don't like cut off circulation and pass out, right? So I have a little soft knees, but squared breathing, right? In, hold, out, hold, and repeat. Okay, and as you do that back and forth, in and out, everybody's going to do it at a slightly different speed, but you want to have equal portions of in, hold, out, hold, repeat, right? And you keep going through that, okay? Pretty simple, really easy to do, and you can kind of do it anywhere. That is the number one thing that all my students mentioned in their reports that reduced anxiety and stress. Great activity. I would recommend doing it if you are a person of faith. I'd recommend doing that for 3 minutes before you pray or read the scriptures or something like that. And I'd recommend doing this before you go into a confrontational situation. Get those types of things can help do that. Okay. The second one of the basic breathing is fill and empty. It's very similar to squared, but what you're going to do is you're going to fill your lungs as much as you can, right? Take as deep a breath as you possibly can. Stop and pause for a moment, not too long, just a moment, and then take another little sharp intake of breath, right? So it'd be something like this. Right? What you're going to do with that, it's really hard to talk and do this at the same time. What you're going to do with that is you're going to get as much as you possibly can and then a little bit more, right? And that little bit more is actually going to get into the kind of deep recesses of your lungs that might not normally get that. And then you're going to empty, right? And you're going to empty by going all the way out, blowing all the way out. And this might take, 7 to 10 seconds, all the way out. And then when you think your lungs are totally empty, one last little puff, right? So I'm going to go in and then out. You'll notice as you do both of these, you can control the volume that you have in your lungs as you're inputting. Your rib cage controls a lot of the volume that you have. So as you're inputting, if you pull your shoulders back, point your chest up into the air a little bit, it'll open things up a little bit more. And I'm going to turn, as you're exhaling, you can curl up and kind of push your shoulders forward and kind of curl into a C, and that'll kind of push, getting more your diaphragm, your rib cage, and your lungs kind of engaged in those types of things. Okay, so squared breathing, great for anxiety and stress. Fill and empty is really good for deep oxygenation. And so if you're doing this type of breathing, you might feel a little bit lightheaded because you might not be used to this level of oxygenation. For fill and empty, I definitely recommend sitting or lying down. Do not do that standing up. Definitely don't do fill empty driving or anything like that. Okay. The next two are visualization. Okay, these are a little bit stranger for people that aren't used to, that are maybe more indoctrinated by like a Western culture. But for like Eastern culture and Eastern thinking, this is not that odd at all. And what you're going to do with these is you're going to engage your imagination, your mind. And these are meditative practices that are very useful when you're doing mindfulness meditation. Now, one thing about meditation that people really misunderstand is, I think in the 80s, a lot of the Hollywood descriptions of this type of thing were talking a lot about, clear your mind and stuff. Your mind is a thinking machine. It's a pattern recognition thinking machine. You can't clear it. It's always thinking. And so the idea is not to clear your mind, but the idea is to let your mind go a little bit, let it wander and let it do things, right? Now, the first one of these, which I call colored breathing, okay, you are going to identify problems in your life, identify things that are either causing you physical, emotional, or mental, pain or discomfort of some kind, right? And as you imagine this, visualize that they have a shape, a color, and a texture, right? And so I will often visualize things that are painful or really hard to deal with as like a hard red, with spikes and different things. Sometimes it pulses, things like that. The really interesting thing about this is if you do this and you talk to other people, everybody has really interesting ways of visualizing this. So you're visualizing some sort of pain point, some sort of problem, and you want a shape for that thing, you want a color for that thing, and you want a texture for that thing. So you want to really understand and visualize. Now, spend some time imagining all of those things. You're not checking boxes off. Take some time as you silently breathe through these types of things. I would recommend closing your eyes. You're trying to engage your senses as much as possible. Okay. And so imagine what it would smell like. Imagine what it would feel like if you touched it, right? Imagine if it's hard or soft, if it's rough, if it's sticky or if it's smooth. Imagine its size and the color and those types of things. Then what you're going to do is you're going to breathe in, and on your intake of breath, you're going to imagine the air coming into you to be a specific color. Now, some people will imagine that it's a fluid. Some people that will imagine that it's a gas. And so whatever works for you is fine. But imagine that you are filling up your body cavity with this color. Okay? And then I want you to imagine that color interacting with this problem shape that you've got, right? And so if I'm imagining a red spiky object, then I might imagine blue, breathing in some sort of blue gas or liquid that then begins to interact with that red object. And as you breathe that in, it might be dissolving it, it might crack it, but you're breathing it in and it's interacting. As you breathe out the mixture of that interaction. And so if I have a red object and I'm breathing in blue, then I would breathe out purple. And what you'll find is that object will reduce, it will melt down, it will crack, or whatever. I had one student have a very interesting experience with this, and she found that she was able to kind of melt several of her problems, but some of them she couldn't. The breathing didn't do anything with it. She actually used this activity to identify problems that she needed some deeper work with. You can't breathe everything away. Like sometimes you need therapy and to do some work on some things. But it was kind of a triage situation for her where she was able to use this colored breathing activity to identify things that were probably a deeper seated issue that needed some deeper work, whereas other things you could kind of solve it. I've done this, and it literally is a way that you can kind of direct your body's immune system, or direct your body's blood flow, or direct your body's kind of things to kind of solve problems. And so I've seen people do this with headaches. I've seen people do this with migraines. I've seen people do this with, chronic pain, those types of things. And so that's colored breathing. Okay. Imagine a problem, give it a shape, color, and texture. And then as you breathe in, that is a color that fills your body. I want you to imagine it filling kind of this cavity where that problem is and interacting with that problem. And then as you breathe out, you're breathing out the mixture of that interaction, right? You do this over the course of, 3 to 5 minutes. Okay. The next one is called river breathing. Okay. This is a mindfulness activity that actually reminds me of a lot of existential theory. The idea of this is that you are training yourself to not assign value to thoughts. Because normally what we do is we think that our thoughts are ourself, right? When in actuality, we think all kinds of things, and that's not you necessarily. And the value that you ascribe to those thoughts is up to you, right? So some things are just random and weird, right? We all, even though we don't like to admit it, have kind of just weird, random thoughts, right? And those thoughts are just thoughts, right? So here's the activity. Okay. Again, as many sensory things as you can do. Imagine yourself on a river. You're sitting on the bank of the river. I want you to imagine what the ground feels like. You might lean back and imagine the grass, the dirt kind of moving in between your fingers. Okay. Imagine the sound of the river flowing by. Get a good sense of where this is, what the background is across from the river. Really paint a picture in your mind. Imagine the trees, what's on the other side of the bank. What does the sky look like? Are there mountains? Are there not mountains? Where are you, right? So you're going to do sight, sound, smell, touch, right? All of those things you're going to go through, and you're going to get a good sense of this river, okay? As you're breathing, okay, breathe deep, have your eyes closed, be sitting for this with your eyes closed, or laying down is fine too. And as you imagine go by, any thought that you have, imagine it floating along this river. You can acknowledge it as a thought, but don't give it any value, positive or negative. Don't judge that thought. Don't fight that thought. Don't embrace that thought. Just let all of the thoughts and feelings just pass by. They're just slowly floating by or quickly floating by. There was a student in my class that had ADHD, and she said, man, that colored breathing, I got through like 4 of them in like a minute. And I was like, okay, you might want to. She was like, no, it was really good. And then I did the river thing, and they're just boom, 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 right? And so some people have, faster thoughts than others, and that's totally fine. But you're watching them float by. You're acknowledging them. They are no different to you than watching a stick or a leaf float down the river. They have no power that you don't give them, right? So the only power that they have is the power that you give them. And in this activity, you're just letting thoughts go by. Good thoughts, bad thoughts, mediocre thoughts, great thoughts. Just let them pass. Just let them float by. I think this is what people meant when they mistakenly said clear your mind, right? It's not that you think nothing, which is impossible unless you're dead. It's that you ascribe no value and spend no real time on the thoughts that are passing through you, right? That's kind of river. So those are the 2 visualizations, okay? So we've got our basic squared, and then we have kind of empty fill, right? And then we have our visualizations, colored, and then river, okay? And now you have the ones that are going to engage your body a little bit more. These are the movement activities, okay? Flex. This is an activity that you can do, and I guarantee that you will sleep deeper and better if you do this right before you go to sleep. This is a great way to go to sleep. It's also a good way to wake up, okay? This is best if you're laying on your back, but you can do it, in an office chair or something like that. I've done it standing up, and it's fine, right? What you're going to do is you're going to start at some extremity. I like to start in my toes, and you're going to work your way from that extremity all the way up, right? And so the activity is that if you're starting with your toes, you clench and flex the muscle groups in that area as much as you possibly can. Really lean into that flexing, right? And then as you're doing that, as you breathe out, release all of that tension, right? So you're gonna arch your foot, curl your toes, and then as you breathe out, you release. And intentionally, as you're breathing, imagine all of those muscles and tendons relaxing and become very relaxed. Then move up into your foot, your ankle, right? You're going to point your toes so that it's engaging the muscles that flex in the front of your shin, right? And same thing, breathe out and relax those. And move up to your calves, your knee, your quadriceps, your hamstrings, your glutes, right? And try to do opposing muscle groups. So when you get up into your core, try to flex the small of your back and the lower abdominals at the same time, right? All the way up until you get to your face and really scrunch all the tiny little muscles and small groups in your face, and then you relax. Most people will fall asleep at this point in time or before this point in time, but it is a great way to intentionally, we carry with us, I don't know if you've ever gone to a massage therapist or a chiropractor or somebody, we carry with us tension and stress where our stress physically manifests itself into tight muscles. And so doing this type of thing is a great way to intentionally release the tension in those muscle groups and relax. All the while breathing, right? The second one is some sort of slow short form. I had a friend of mine, it was probably 15 years ago, teach me some short form Tai Chi. It's slow, deliberate body movements. Any martial arts kata that is done slowly with deep breathing will work for this. But you can also just move, right? The idea is to very slowly and intentionally move around while you're breathing, right? You might feel some resistance or some energy kind of moving with you as you do this type of thing. And if you're not into the kind of, that kind of thinking, that's fine. But you're just moving your body, extending and contracting your extremities, slowly moving around as much as you can as you're doing some deep breathing, right? For an extra added bonus, do this outside and barefoot, and you'll add a little bit of grounding while you do that. There's been a couple studies done about like your barefoot skin touching non-man-made things, dirt and grass and things like this. There's some real benefits to that. We have kind of a genetic disposition to have endorphins released when we're in nature and when we engage with nature, right? And so if you can do this on grass or dirt or something that isn't concrete or carpet, extra added bonus for that. Okay. Third one is yoga, kind of as a breathing and stretching activity, but not yoga as a religion. I don't have any problem with yoga as a religion, but what I'm talking about here is not getting into all of the spiritualist side of that thing, but just moving slowly, stretching, and breathing. Yoga's very good at that. So those are the things that I recommend when you're creating space. So create space is the first stage of this. If you do this week, try to do it for at minimum a few minutes a day, but if you can get 30 minutes a day, this really you'll start to see some real benefit. And so, wash the dishes, take the shower, drive your car, go on walks without things in your eyes and ears, right? Just observe and be an observer. And then if you can get some breathing kind of built into your day through any of these three, whether you're doing kind of the basic, whether you're doing the visualizations or whether you're doing the movement, it can be really helpful. Now, these things, some people like some and don't like the others, and that's fine. So this is kind of a thing. And your mileage may vary on what this isn't a really prescriptive thing. I'm not trying to sell you some sort of process or whatever. The idea is that you need to create space for your creativity to blossom. If you're going to have creative thoughts, then you need to create an environment where those creative thoughts can flourish. Okay, in the subsequent videos, in the following videos, we are going to go over the next stages. After you create space, we're going to talk about input, the things that you put in to your mind, and we're going to get into some of that. And then after that, we will talk about capture, which I recommend you keep a sketchbook and you do at least a page a day in your sketchbook. And this is not like one of those challenges or whatever, you need to beat yourself up. And I'm not talking about drawing, and we'll talk more about that. Sketching, note-taking, capture is basically don't let a thought or question go by that you don't capture somehow. And then finally play. And I think there's been a lot of stuff that talks about execution, which is the 5th stage. We're not going to get into execution because it's been done to death, but those are the 4 stages that we're going to cover. So create space, which is what we talked about today. And then you're going to get into, what was the second one? Create space. Oh, input, right? Pre-digital input, getting out of the current zeitgeist into some deeper waters and stuff that's a little bit older and a little bit more interesting from a, theological, philosophical, historical perspective. And then getting into capture. And then getting into play, which kind of comes full circle of trying to get into that childlike wonder and those types of things. I have read many, many books and had a lot of experiences over the last 10 years in teaching these types of classes, and just watching this stuff really, really affect people. And so if you give this a shot, this is the challenge that we're going to be doing. This is we're doing it with my family as well. My wife said that she would come on and to kind of talk about her experiences with it. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts. I've been talking too much. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this and your experiences. So tell me how it goes. Tell me what you're doing as well. And what you've seen me be drawing, that is available at my store. If you go to CoreyKerr.com/store, you can see that and many other things. You'll notice that it's a little bit of a twist on the esoteric crumble flux, where I'm talking about things ending, societies ending, and this is a nuclear fallout, which would make it really hard to breathe. Should I give that so that's the tie-in for this one. Talking about breathing. Great. And if you want to make sure that you don't miss any of these episodes, then make sure that you sign up for my email newsletter, where all of these will go out at CoreyKerr.com/email. And otherwise, I will see you guys next time I do one of these videos, which is probably next week. Go make stuff.